Anthony Parent, tension and release. I haven't spoken to Anthony in decades, 20, 30 years. I was an assistant soccer coach at a high school in Connecticut, and Anthony was one of the student athletes. And I remember him not having a lot of the natural gifts, but just working hard, very driven, and just a wonderful person to coach. Anthony went to law school with his father. Actually, they went together, and was working in criminal law, but then eventually became the IRS medic. He knows the IRS. He does all tax laws now. What do you know about the IRS? I'll tell you one thing. You don't know what Anthony knows. After you hear what he has to say about the IRS, how it was constructed, what presidents helped, what presidents did not. It's not a political discussion at all, by the way, but just his insight on the IRS and tax law and the structure. It's a fascinating conversation. He's also a musician. I opened the conversation with, he plays guitar, he sings. We have a mutual friend, a great friend in Tom Izzo, which is one of his instructors. But just a wonderful conversation. So great to speak to Anthony again and get a very, very different view on the IRS from somebody, I want to say from the inside, but from the outside that's inside. Thanks so much for listening and watching. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. Before you know it, I found myself 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People think there's some secret. Ask me, how'd you lose that weight? Like there's some secret. There is no secret. How'd I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends, colleagues convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others. So much, Anthony Parent. I'm so excited to talk to you. Thank you for your time today. Tell me, Anthony, what's your favorite chord on the guitar?
Oh, my favorite chord? Actually, I have one, but I've been talked out of it. But I have a favorite, and it actually makes sense. Yeah, no, I've been talked out of it, and it makes sense. I would say this: it's gonna be an E minor or a E minor 7. And the reason why is because it responds well to open E tuning, and so E minor. It's like that's what I say. Is like that's the most relaxing chord. One of those two. It's going to be the E minor 7, just played a little higher. And those are the best chords, and those are your money chords because the guitar's tuned to that. So that kind of helps you out. So I do have a lot of songs that will go to to my favorite chord. Yeah.
And who talked you out of it? In this fast-paced MSP landscape, how do you stay ahead? Introducing MSPinfluencer.com, your ultimate hub for MSP news, insights, and community connection, powered by Forza Dash. More than 75,000 MSPs subscribe to our MSP Influencer Pulse weekly newsletter, staying informed and ahead of industry trends. Tune in to emerging podcasts from Joey Pinz and leading MSP voices, offering essential tips, powerful insights, and success stories. Explore our multi-author blogs crafted specifically for MSP leaders, delivering fresh perspectives and actionable strategies. Celebrate excellence with the industry-leading Forza Dash MSP Influencer Awards, recognizing innovation, leadership, and impact in the MSP community. Join thousands of MSP professionals who trust MSPinfluencer.com to grow their business and expand their networks. MSPinfluencer.com, where today's MSP leaders connect, collaborate, and conquer, all powered by the Forza Dash platform, helping MSP vendors work effectively with MSPs and helping MSPs grow.
Well, it was one of your previous guests, Tom Izzo. That's how I found out about
Tom Izzo.
The great Tom Izzo. That's how I found out about your channel. That he said, "Oh, hey, I was on Joe Panone's channel." I said, "What?" I said, "He's got a channel." I watched the interview. I'm like, "Oh my god, this is great! This is great!" Because Tom is exactly who he is in person.
Yes,
and I worked with him for about 4 years. He's really helping me. He's conservatory trained, so I got a heck of an education right during COVID when everyone else is going nuts. I should have been going nuts.
Mm.
But I had my kind of constant like musical education with Tom every week, and every Friday we would sort of go over what I did during the week, and I really put my heart and soul into it, and really glad that I did because I would never have the time any other time in my life to do it. It was just sort of this opening happened, and I took advantage of it while I could. So
But
yeah.
why did he talk you out of E minor or E minor 7?
Well, because I would say, "Oh, this is the best chord," and this is what he would tell me. He said, "Anthony, this is your problem," and this is really what revolutionized my a lot of my thinking. He goes, "Here's your problem. You're just going for the release. Okay, music is,"
Hmm.
and this is what Tom said. He goes, "Music is nothing but tension and release." And oh my God! Then I started thinking about a lot of art forms, and that what I was trying to do because my life was so chaotic that I wouldn't accept the bad. I wouldn't accept the tension. I just wanted to get rid of the tension and get to this ideal of relaxing on the beach with my music and just having that lifestyle. And then you find out, well, that's not what life is, and it's actually the constraints in your life, your limitations in your life, are going to create the art. And so I was like, okay, why don't you just embrace? And so really Tom was more about like, look, in order to set up the release, you got to make it tight. You got, it kind of has to be a little awful or a little uncomfortable, but overall good. And then when you get to the money, then you release. Oh, okay, now people feel good. And that's kind of what I
Hmm.
learned, really helpful. And that's just sort of helped me, getting involved in this to the level with Tom really helped me, I think, in my business communications as well. Because you have to go, like, sometimes you want to go into that tension. Like, don't back off, go all the way in. Don't don't
Hmm.
don't be afraid. Don't be
Hmm.
afraid to go all the way in and make it a little uncomfortable. So that's kind of one of the things I learned. Yeah.
Tension and release. That's
Tension.
fascinating.
Yep.
So you're creating suspense, you're creating anticipation.
Yes. Yes. And that's where I started as a songwriter. I had none of that. I just wanted to get to, and that's why I would say, and so Tom was like, come on, dude, you just can't do it. I had, a few of the songs I throw out there were just toggling back between, open, dreamy sounds. They didn't really go anywhere. And I'm really thinking, I'm like, yeah, huh, what's going on here? I'm like, yeah, this doesn't sound quite right. And it doesn't really have a lot of depth to it. And then the problem is none of life is that way. Now
Hmm.
we don't experience long segments of bliss ever. We get moments here and
Mhm.
there. And
Mm.
we try to string them together so that the momentum from one can power us to the next.
Mm.
But we don't get this thing of relaxation and okay, there it is. Just a moment. Like, okay, hey, that was a good job. You get 15 minutes of feeling good, I think. And then it's back to, then it's back to work.
Fasc
And it's really that's kind of what I found is like don't look for a big amount of relaxation because also I'm bored by it. So that's kind of one of the things like, yep, you're gonna feel good, not for long, but remember that feeling and how you got there.
tension and release. How do you
Tension.
know when a song is done?
When you could play it and explain it to your bandmates, that's when you
Hmm.
know it's done. And that's when it's done. And that's because you will continue to fine tune it. And as you play with other people, you'll kind of continue to sort of hone it. But where one of the struggles that I had was when I started getting into this, I was, a singer songwriter. I'm focusing more on lyrics and chord structure over timing because it's only me.
Mm.
So I could be all off on timing and still kind of get through it. But the problem is like, okay, now what happens when you show it to other people to play? Well, it's got to match up to some time. It's got to be in time. You got to be in time with other people. So that was where my biggest, because I was working on myself. So now finally, after a few years, I've been able to get some bands together, and I've actually been singing in the Church of Resurrection choir.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, which is just an amazing experience. Yeah.
I remember an interview once with Phil Collins where they asked him, "How can you sing and play the drums at the same time?" And he said, "It's actually easier than not playing the drums because I get to control the tempo." Now, when you have to explain the song to the band, what do you mean by that, Anthony?
Well, they got to be able to know what parts are what, and it actually has to show up on some sort of grid, at least not on paper, at least in your mind. So,
Hmm.
the drummer looks at things as like, okay, I got to do two A sections, and then I got to do two B sections, and I got to do four A, and that's kind of how they're thinking of the song. in the sections, and that I actually was leaving gaps here and there. It's like, well, what am I doing in that section? And I would just fill in the blanks. Like, well, that's no. Somebody needs to know what they're going to need to do. So that's, I think, how you know a song is ready, when you're ready to show it to a band. Now, that's generally how it is. I guess that's if I'm writing a song myself, but sometimes, you're collaborating with other people. And so, a lot of things sometimes will just start off as a jam. You're just jamming away and something sounds good and you just
Mm.
kind of go with it. And, I did that a lot for my first band with Phil Kovacs. So we did that. My first band, we just did, came up with a lot of songs, just jamming. And those are fun too. And those are fun to come up another way too. Just like, okay, here's some ideas we have, and just see what happens.
So here's the thing, Anthony. So you're very artistic. You play guitar, you write songs, but then you have IRS medic. You're a tax attorney. It would seem to me that's a lot more science, whereas the music is a lot more art. How do you?
No. And I think that's what makes me an effective tax attorney.
Ah,
This is really the problem. The top profession that will hire me to solve their tax problem, hands down, engineers. Engineers. I love
uh,
engineers. I love engineers.
mm,
Engineers get into problems because they apply logic.
hmm,
They apply logic, and I'm like, yeah, I see what you did there. You thought this was going to happen because you applied logic. It doesn't work like that. There's secret rules, and there's secret, there's a whole secrecy. The IRS is 100% an art firm. Art firm.
really?
Oh, absolutely. And here's a situation. Here's a situation I have with a client, big client, and actually that's actually what's going on right now, is that the IRS stopped all collections, for the most part, of high income earners. Why? Because they don't have the revenue officers who could do it. So right now the IRS just published something. There's 300,000 people, high income earners, who are unfiled, that the IRS is trying to go after. I'm starting to get some of those. Starting to get some of them, and have them. And so what happens with these people is that, uh, um, you're trying to figure out the solution to the problem. You're saying, okay, well, look, we have to work out a divorce resolution, but we don't have the IRS. And we're trying to figure out, like, well, what can we give to the ex-wife that won't get the client in trouble? Because technically they can't give anything, but technically they might be able to. And so I just said, hey, look, guys, we got to hold off on this divorce because the amount of debt is too much. If the amount of debt was lower, okay, there's no formula. If it was a lower, I'd say, you know what, we'd be fine. But we're
Hmm.
looking at a big debt here, and this, like, that's not going to work. Well, I finally got a revenue officer on signed to case 2 weeks ago. And I talked to her. I said, oh, glad you called, because we didn't know what to do. And then she said, exactly. She said, Anthony, if you actually transfer that money, that would have been a huge problem. I said,
Uh,
yeah. I said, because he owes too much. She goes, yes, that's right. And that's sort of the art form, just knowing the feel of it.
huh.
You kind of have to know the feel of the bureaucracy. And so it's much more by feel than scientific. Not whatsoever, not at all. And it's a human element at the IRS. That's really the thing. So how can you be scientific when you're, dealing? There's ways to approach it. There's ways to approach it, but no, AI, an AI can't get that feel. AI
Right.
is great at supporting when you're looking for, some weird sites here and there of things to build your case, but that's not the feel of knowing where the IRS employees are. You really got to be able to sit, you got to know what their constraints are. Why do they give, what are they looking for? What are they? And I think that's one of my, one of the secrets. And well, that's how I got it. My dad was a lifelong government employee. And so he went to law school, graduated when he was 59, which is a feat that we went to law school together. We had federal
Yeah.
income tax together. We did that. Well, he was a lifetime government employee. So I kind of had a secret training. So we're dealing with the IRS, and my dad's the IRS whisperer. And the thing is, like, he's the goofiest attorney, I think, personable, hilarious, and disarming. And that's what made him. I mean, I just learned so much from him, about how to actually get tax justice. And it's really
Hmm.
looking at the IRS. Who is administering it? It's people. What are they looking for? And the answer is, they're looking to get to the end of the day without too much stress. That's what they're
Mm,
looking for. And
mm.
so, can you give it to them? Can you wrap it up for them? Hey, here's the whole thing. Just accept it. Your supervisor will approve, and that's how you kind of get things done. Yeah.
And then that's so counterintuitive. I mean, you would think that the IRS is just full of rules and regulations and everything is you just gotta follow this and follow that and follow that, but you said there's lots of gray between.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I would say this is that the tax industry, most CPAs, tax preparers, they approach the IRS totally different. The way that they approach it is that they go to trainings that oftentimes the IRS puts on, or someone who went to an IRS training puts on.
Oh.
And you're getting what the IRS wants you to think 100%. And so some of the stuff is helpful and you need to know, but there's still so much discretion in everything, all the time. And it's how you characterize, how you characterize and then support that story. And I would say that this is also the advantage that I had before I got into tax. I didn't get into tax in 2006 because I'm running a business, being the jackass of all trade. Hopefully, I can say that word. And I got to find a niche. I got to find a niche. And I'm doing criminal law. And I mean, I had some big wins as a newbie
Saw that.
attorney. I had some impressive wins, if you don't mind me saying. But I couldn't make any money. I'm like, oh, that didn't do me any good. I'm like, all I'm getting is criminals. This, right? It's like, well, I'm hanging out. My clients aren't really helping me in my own, career, because these are people who can't put one foot in front of the other without getting arrested. And
Mm.
after you save them one time, you get another call. Hey, I just got picked up again. You're like, oh, come on, come on. And it's just sort of endless. And so criminal law was just like, I was really good at it, but there's a problem in your client base. No offense, but they're not a lot of fun. And then there's not a lot of stakes, and then you don't really want the repeat business. There's nothing to do with them afterwards, right?
Uh,
And so I was looking like, well, I'm really trying to make a business here. So I'm like, I'm going to get people in for their IRS problem, and then we're going to service them year after year for their bookkeeping and tax prep. That's sort of
hmm.
the idea, and that's what we've been doing. So we look at it. So, back to your point though, of the what the tax industry looks at it as black and white. And I always laugh every time because I always can find, when like, no, there's nothing sure. I always can find an exception when someone wants to, like, do a flex about how much they know. I just laugh because we approach it a different way. As attorneys, we look at it from a due process angle. That's the way we're looking at the tax code. It's like, okay, what did you know? What did you tell the person? Did you tell them? Did you notify them? Did you explain to their rights to them? That's how we're looking at it. We're looking at it through the legal prism of, is this at all enforceable? Whereas, the tax industry will look at it as, hey, here's how you avoid problems. Do it there, do it the way IRS does. Well, we got the problems already came. Problems
Hmm.
here. So what are
Hmm.
we going to do with it? And there's just a lot of flexibility. And then the thing that I would say that gave me an advantage is when I was doing criminal law, I had overturned a couple of convictions. I overturned a plea of guilty, which I don't think was ever done in the state of Connecticut. Not sure how great
Wow.
that was for the justice system, though, too. I'm like, okay, I got a win on that case. Maybe there was another case I really wanted to win on that I didn't get. And so
Mm.
that's like, you win on the case. It's like, no. So anyway, but one of the things I learned, and this was my very first case, I got this when I was at the Quinnipiac uh, um, Appellate Defense Clinic. And it was, it's funny. Like, I wanted, you want this case, you want your criminal defense case, you want like the sexiest case you can think of. I'm like hoping to get a murder. This is the way you are when you're ambitious, right? You're hoping
Yeah.
you get something really like murder, terrible, right? And unfortunately, I got a violation of probation. I'm like, oh, this is a dumb case. Violation of probation is not a big deal. But then I found something interesting. As soon as it's your case, it's now the most important issue of all
Mm.
time.
Mm.
And so I met the defendant, and his name was Don Johnson. It's public record, I can say that.
Yes, I saw that.
Um, and I met the defendant. I'm like, all right, I love this. I love this case. And this is where I rebelled against my professor, who was the chief of the public defender division. He said, Anthony, I want you to do, your issue is going to be the authority of the probation officer. Do they have the authority to violate him? And I said, I'm looking at him like, yeah, that's not going to work. I'm like, that's going to work. My dad worked in the adult department of probation. I'm like, that's not going to
Mm.
be a winning argument. The courts are always going to back up on authority. And I said to him, I said, well, what about this issue right here? I'm noticing here, when he's in prison, they said, hey, before we release you, you have to sign these conditions of probation. I said, I find it interesting he didn't sign those conditions of probation. What do you
Hmm.
think about that? And he said, no, no, that's a losing issue. And I'm like, I don't think that's a losing issue. I think that's the winner. And so he goes, no, no, don't talk about that. So what I did, and this is what I did, is I talked about that issue in the facts. The facts are where you win your cases. And this is so true. The law is backfilled in order to support the conclusion the finder of fact already wants.
Hmm.
That's how it works. Facts are how you win. So it is your job to develop the facts and point out what's important. And so that was where, and so that's something I did. So I snuck it in. So I snuck my argument into the facts. I went up to Hartford to the appellate court and argued my issue. They didn't talk anything about the facts argued the authority the best I could, but I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And I was giving them, they were having a lot of fun with me, as my dad said. And I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't give up. And I was just fighting. So we waiting for the decision. I got a call from my professor, Marty Zeldis. He said, Anthony, I'm going to kill you. I said, why is that? He goes, well, the appellate court ordered, um, they ordered additional briefing on the issue that you raised in the facts.
Ah.
And he's like, oh my God, you were right. And he's like, God bless Marty. He said, you were 100% right. I learned a lesson here myself. Thank you. And so we did that. And then what happened is that we're going to argue. So we still had our appeal. Now they want to talk about this. Then the state said, okay, we got a bad case. So then the state settled and removed the violation of probation.
Wow.
So that was one of the lessons I learned. And then I did some more training at the public defender. They had more training. I went to another training, and this is probably a better example of where to do it. That sometimes you end up with this is how you think about it. You end up with cases with bad facts, bad facts. Like say your client did really something terrible. You can't get around that. Like, look, you're representing someone who murdered someone. That's a bad fact. The jury, people aren't going to look at that person. Just the accusation is coloring them. So this was the example given to me at this great training that the public defender division put on. And I can't remember his name. He was an attorney. He bet on horses all the time. And in the
Huh.
summer he was off because he was betting on the horses. But he would go around and do these trainings. And he said this: okay, you're trying to claim in a case of conviction where a brutal murder took place that the jury was improperly influenced based on a racial motivation, that someone was improperly not included on the jury.
Hmm.
Okay. And so he goes, he lists through the bad facts of how this murder happened. He goes, okay, so he said, I want to ask you all, where do you start your facts? And I raised my hand. I said, I'm going to say this. The juror dismissed was black. I said, it's this, you start the facts somewhere on a bus in Birmingham, Alabama. That's what this case is really about. And
Hmm.
he said, you're absolutely right. That's what we did. We made this case not about the murderer who was trying to get overturned. We're trying to make it about this juror who was denied his right to be the finder of fact based on improper racial motivations. Um, so that's really where, and so I took all that criminal stuff, and that's where I put it into tax, because if you don't explain it, they're going to fill in the facts with all
Hmm.
things you're not going to like. So you need to get out your narrative first and compelling with support, and then everybody else. And then it's funny, everybody else is just they're going to accept it. They're going to accept that as a fact because you got it out first. You anticipated it, and now your story's getting out there, and now justice can happen because it's really not in the law. The
Hmm.
justice is not in the law; it's in the facts.
How should the public here in the States look at jury duty?
I would say this, boy, jury duty. It's I would, in a way, jurors aren't allowed to be jurors. That's what I would say. I think that we get a version. We get sold a story that jury duty is helping protect our rights, but the way that jurors are instructed and the way that their hands are tied, I don't see it really as a good thing,
Hmm.
because they are not allowed to be given all the facts. And especially now, this is where I would say in a tax trial consequence, because it's something that always comes up for me now. Preparing for ones, hopefully they never happen. Dealing and try to get rid of indictments always happens. The you're trying. This is the way jurors think, and this is where most tax attorneys go totally wrong. Most attorneys don't even really realize this. When a juror is looking to convict someone of tax evasion or not, this is what they're trying to figure out. Well, why didn't they pay their taxes?
Hmm.
I pay my taxes. Why didn't they pay their taxes? They didn't pay their taxes. Well, yeah, they're guilty of not paying their taxes. The jury doesn't know. The defendant's
Mm.
going to go away to jail. They don't know. So the case, and now, and then this is the other problem for the government. This is what you have to think. The tax code is so complicated beyond. There's not anyone in the government who could possibly understand it. Nobody. There's always big things I learn every day. I've been doing this a while. It is so expansive and it's designed to be ever, ever expansive.
Jeez.
No person could get their hands around this. So the IRS also has this problem. How do you prove tax evasion when the tax bill is so difficult to figure out and you'll get a different opinion on what the tax bill is going to be? And the answer is how the IRS, how they do it is they kind of mislead people along the road. Like, yeah, we'll get back to you. They wait for you not to get into compliance. Then they come back to say, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And now you have the problem. You didn't pay the taxes you owed. You're likely going to be convicted. If you
Hmm.
pay before that, if you pay before the jury hears, they're like, oh, why are we here? That's what they're really there for. So that's, I think, one of the big things to understand. So what is, now in this case, Joe, what is the jury really hearing? Right? They're
Hmm.
really not looking at the law. They're really not. They're like, okay, we like this person. They're looking at things totally wrong. So I think that the jury duty is so wrong. And then we also have the grand juries, which is often not talked about. We have sitting grand juries, all around, and it's supposed to protect the defendant by having secret prosecutions. That's really what it is. I don't think that's helpful because
Mm.
who is there to monitor that the prosecution is being fair? Well, it's the judge, right? That's really it. The judge is the only person there, but there's no one on the accused side saying, "Wait, why are we here? What are we doing?" And so the grand jury mechanism is also, I think, a problem because whatever's going on in this world right now, I could say one thing: is we don't have a lot of justice in America. And so whatever the status quo is things resulting in it. So I would say I never really thought about it, Joe, but I don't think jury duty, it's sold as a good,
Mm.
but it doesn't offer a lot. And it's miserable to do.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna ask you to hold on just one moment.
Yep. Yeah, you bet.
I could tell you one time, I was called for jury duty there in New Haven, and I got called, and I'm sitting there with all the jurors, and then the attorney stands up and starts talking. Says my client is guilty, and he starts talking about things. And a couple minutes go by, and I'm thinking, if he's guilty, why are we here? And he keeps talking, and then the defendant like calls the attorney over, whispers in his ear, and the attorney says, "Oh, my apologies, he's not guilty." So the judge puts the thing down and says, "Okay, this is dismissed. All the jurors go home. We'll get a new jury." So he went a good 10 minutes speaking about his his client as guilty when yeah, it's the truth. This happened. This is anecdotal, certainly, but yeah, that happened, and we're in the elevator as jurors thinking, does this happen often? I mean, it's great for us. We get to go, but this is absolutely ridiculous.
I just wonder if that attorney was trying to get out of the case.
Ah,
That's where my suspicions first went. I'm like,
I
that's
wonder.
yeah, because that would be that's falling below a reasonable a standard of competency. Yeah, yeah, you don't
Certainly.
want no, you don't want to do it that way. Yeah, the other one. Sorry, guys, the other one. Yeah.
It's
Oh wow.
interesting though that an attorney like yourself would say that uh, it's really not justice juries. That's a fascinating take, Anthony.
Yeah, no, it's really not. And again, it's not that the jurors are wrong, but what they're told and what's explained to them. And their limitations, and it always frustrated me. And I think one of my least favorite classes in law school was evidence, because evidence is what's going to decide the outcome of the case.
Hmm.
And like, well, we can't give that to the jury because it's too prejudicial. It's like, oh, so you mean like the jury will rule against the way you want them to,
Right,
basically,
right.
because it's really good evidence that sort of blows out your thing. Well, that's just too um, um, it's too emotional or something. So the
Hmm.
evidence game is really where justice sort of falls off the rails, and you get, wait, the jury couldn't consider that. And I would have a few criminal cases. I had one this is incredible. The one that I wanted to get off more than anything. This guy, his name was Tyson Hunter, young guy in Waterbury. He was charged with murder, and he was put in jail when he was 19 years old. And he was not going to get out until, I think, 55,
Hmm.
older than I am now. And so I met him in 2007, 2008. And I looked at this case, and this is what drove me nuts, because I looked at the trial transcript and going through it. Tyson's entire theory of the case is like, I know who did the crime.
Hmm.
I know who did the actual murder. It was these three dudes. And now the thing is, one of the reasons why Tyson couldn't get any witnesses, because one of those three dudes was a really bad dude.
Hmm.
So he intimidated all the witnesses, but you wouldn't believe it. The bad dude died in a violent gunfight. Believe it or not, I know. And it's really strange. And so then all the witnesses said, hey, let's get a new trial, because all the witnesses are now willing to say, hey, look, we know Tyson didn't do it. We know, and now because I'm not worried about this guy coming in and killing me, I could tell you who did it. And so he had a habeas corpus trial. He lost that trial, and then I had the appeal, and I wanted to win that appeal more than anything. I talked.
Hmm.
The problem I had, though, is with the DNA. Basically, is the thing that it became the new standard to get people off it. It's like, hey, I had an unfair conviction. Wow, the DNA got me. Proved that I wasn't there. Well, there was a time before you didn't need DNA to get a new trial.
Hmm.
But what happened? All the courts look for DNA evidence now to get a new trial. Not that the fact that, wait a second, the witnesses weren't allowed to testify because they were afraid that this violent person would shoot them. Okay, that would say, okay, there was no fair trial at the time. And so should have won. I wanted to appeal that, and I lost. And I was so utterly heartbroken. I reached out to Hope Seeley at the Innocence Project. Now she's a Supreme Court justice in Connecticut. And she was like, yeah, there's no DNA. I'm like, I know there's no DNA. Thank you. But that was one case. And so I would check in on Tyson, just like, is there any chance this guy's ever going to get out? And then last year I was going through I was looking him up on the prisoner lookup. I'm like, why is his name not here? I can't find his name. And I'm looking, I'm like, all right, let me just try a Google search. So I'm like, Tyson Hunter, Waterbury, Connecticut. Tyson Hunter freed after 30. I like,
Wow.
he got out. And so I think there was some help. Maybe a few of the people I've reached out to might have seen kind of what happened. And so he's out, and I'm friends with him on Facebook now. So so that was one. That was one. But I saw that, and this is what at his original criminal trial, this is what floored me. So Tyson put on the three guys that he accused of doing the murder. The judge says, well, I don't want a trial within a trial.
Wow.
I'm like, what? And I'm reading. This is what I was saying. This is one of the reasons why I have the opinion about jurors that I do, is because every time you get a bad decision, you could point to the transcript to say, that's the reason right there. Every time I did a bunch of criminal appeals, every time I'm like, let me find the transcript. I'm going to be able to hone right in where it went bad. And so all the time, the juries are given wrong instructions and they're told the wrong thing, or the judge isn't just going to allow that evidence in. And so this is all the judge did. So he's like, okay, well, I'll let them come in and take, I'll let them come in and state their name. It's like, okay, what else? Nothing else. So he couldn't even bring up the fact that they were pleading the Fifth Amendment. And that is a Superior Court judge in Waterbury, Connecticut, who did that. So when you ask, like, do juries, like, well, the jury wasn't allowed to do their job. And if I was on the jury, I would be livid. I would be livid. You allowed me to convict someone who was innocent because you withheld evidence from me. Why did three guys plead the Fifth Amendment? And so that's kind of one of the reasons why. That I really have the opinion that I do. The jury's hands are tied, and that when the jury reaches a decision, it sort of washes clean. Yeah, it's like, oh, it's the jury's fault. Yeah, but you instructed them. You instructed them, and you limited them. And every time they rule in a way, there's a reason. When you look at the transcript, you'll find the reason.
Going back to the IRS. Hey, Joey Pinz here. Want to take your podcast experience to the next level? I'm excited to invite you to become a YouTube member. It's the absolute best way to support the channel and enhance your connection. Join our amazing community and unlock the incredible perks, custom loyalty badges, exclusive emojis, and priority comment replies. Your voice will always stand out. Be the first to watch new videos with early access, receive special membership shoutouts, and get exclusive behind-the-scenes photos and updates. Dive into content available only to our members, special videos, deep dives, and insider perspectives. Engage directly with me. Suggest podcast topics you want to hear, and even get personalized video shoutouts. Hit the join button right now and become part of something special. Let's build this amazing community together. I can't wait to welcome you as a new member. Join the Joey Pinz family today. Anthony, though, as a business owner, I mean, they definitely instill fear. I mean,
Yes.
because people go to jail, right,
Yes.
for not paying taxes. So
Yes.
you say that there's magic there. You say there's a lot of artistry there, but what business owners and people really need is somebody like you who understands it.
I would think so. I do. I mean, I think taxes are the thing where, and this is what's crazy. Like, look, I did at one point I didn't know tax. I really didn't know
Mm,
much, but
mm,
I'm like, you know what? It's a really good thing to learn. Why? Because it matters. And why? And I would say a lot of business owners, they've just like, I'm going to abdicate my knowledge of the tax code to my tax profession. And I think that's one of the worst ideas because you are ultimately on the hook for everything they
yes.
do that you sign. You are on the hook. You yourself should know what is going on. And that's why I like doing my channel, just so some people are interested. Like, okay, this is really how you should approach it. And so I think that there's far too much reliance on the tax profession by business owners. They'll just, oh, my guy's been doing this for years and it hasn't been a problem.
Mm,
Like, and the classic problem that has been going on, and this is just because now this is really the problem. For years I always tell people like, hey, look, if you're in business for yourself, you might not want to put that on a Schedule C.
mm,
It's like you might not want to do that. And here's the reason why. It's the second most audited form by the IRS after the earned income tax credit. The IRS goes after poor people first, then small business owners the second. And I tell my friends this, like, you should have an S corp. Why? Oh, you might save a little bit on taxes, but your audit rate drops. Your audit rate drops. Your audit rate for a Schedule C is 1 in 100. Your audit rate for
really?
an S corp is 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000. Are you nuts? And right now, and unfortunately, I've been doing a lot of work, and we've always been successful. The IRS is off the rails, and I'm currently a great friend of mine who I'm helping on the audit. It's not go. The IRS is breaking its own rules,
Wow.
and if he listened to me years ago and didn't file a Schedule C, we would be talking about much better things than
Wow.
this. So that's one thing where people just don't do it. And their tax pro's like, oh, you're not going to save the money if you're doing the. It's like, it's not okay. Do you want to save your life?
Mm,
And this is what I have guys that even winning an audit, you still didn't win.
hmm.
You still didn't win because you had to deal with it. You had to deal with them, and you had to deal with that entire thing. Now, I would say this is designed. It's designed to make us feel weak. And with the way the IRS works, they don't have enough people to administer this tax code in a million years. There's not enough. There's too much to do. So what they have to do is rule by fear and intimidation. The IRS has never indicted more than 3,000 people a year for tax evasion. And
Wow.
2022 was about 692. 692 people. Like that, wait, and the IRS criminal division is tiny, tiny, tiny. So what they're going to do, this is their goal. And this is what you need to understand. Their goal in a tax evasion case isn't to collect money. It's not even necessarily to send you to jail.
Hmm.
Their goal is a press release. Their goal is a
Really?
press release. Yes, that's their goal. They want to scare someone just like you. Oh, you thought you were going to be cute just like them. You're going to get it. That's what they love to do. So, so when you're analyzing a
Mm,
criminal case, okay, let's think about the press release. That has to go in your mind immediately. How do you defeat that press release? What are the things the IRS looks for? Someone who it's like they need that $1 million. They need $1 million, either unreported income or taxes due. They need $1 million because according to the IRS, people still think $1 million is a lot of money, even though it can go pretty quickly if you got a
yeah,
business. A
yeah,
million dollars go out the door pretty
right.
quickly. So they're looking for that $1 million to get in there. So yeah, and then they're looking for a lavish lifestyle. The word
Mm,
lavish has to come out.
mm,
So is your client doing anything lavish? Okay, what can we do about that? What
hmm,
kind of business? And is he not liked for other reasons? Like, oh, one of the top criminal tax evasions that explains it all is actually the Al Capone tax evasion.
uh,
There, we're told a totally wrong story about what happened. We're told that Al Capone paid off the jury, and then they switched it at the last time so that he couldn't take advantage of it. And it's completely backwards. The bad guys in the Al Capone tax evasion case are actually the U.S. Treasury.
really?
Absolutely. Secretary of Treasury was furious at Al Capone because he was more popular than him. He was
Uh,
a popular guy. And this is how we know you are lied because Al Capone hired an attorney. to send a letter to the IRS to say, yes, we are aware Al Capone needs to file his taxes. We're looking to pay his taxes. We think he owes about this much. Okay. So that is there. So what did the government do with that? They sat on that letter and they worked this ridiculous case. Now, here's some things about Al Capone most people don't know. He was a problem gambler. He was such a bad gambler. He's like, I'm losing money at the horses. I'll just buy the horse track.
Hmm.
So when Al Capone said he didn't make all that much money, he was likely telling the truth. And that his lifestyle of like, he really wasn't evading all that much in taxes. But we're told a complete lie about it. And then the government gets this whole lifestyle audit thing. Oh, well, it looks like you're making a lot of money. What is that? So that is the foundations of where, the government's like, and then, the government wanted to get Al Capone. They just wanted to get him out of the way. And, probably why, because he wasn't, bribing the right people. If he was bribing the right
Mm.
people, he would have been fine.
Jeez.
So that's you got it. It's all wrong. The entire history is we're brainwashed into accepting once you dig, because none of it really makes sense when you think about like, well, look, if we're a nation founded because of a tax on tea, how did we end up with this? And the answer is we've been lied to for a long time. That's
Mm.
the reason. Yeah.
Anthony, you wrote a bestseller,
Yeah.
IRS Confidential. What do you want the reader to come away with?
So what I wanted to, and it's a lot of things that we're talking about this. So I wrote that in 2014, and I really want to write a follow up because it's even crazier than what is. I think the number one thing is that in the book, I put a whole bunch of impossible stories, about how this client is not going to make it out. And it's going to be terrible. But then one little trick that took a nightmare and turned it into a positive resolution. And so the number one thing I would tell people is don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. And that is the whole
Mm.
point of the book. But you don't want to give up hope foolishly. You want to give up hope when you understand what it actually is. That the tax code is we're just lied about it. We're just totally lied, and the government lies about it. There's no one in the federal government who's on your side. The
Hmm.
entire point of the federal government is to lie to us. That's
Hmm.
that's the entire point, and to make us pay for things we don't want to. But even I mean, and then this is even going further. The IRS actually doesn't collect any money.
Hmm.
It doesn't collect any revenue. The IRS is disguised as a revenue raising agency, but really, what it does, it destroys excess dollars the Federal Reserve creates in order that hyperinflation doesn't occur. The federal
Huh.
government gets all the money it needs from the Federal Reserve, and it will spend it wherever. And so, why have an IRS? We don't need, right? The government can get everything it needs. Well, if you did that, you'd have hyperinflation. So the job of the IRS is to destroy the dollars of its political enemies, which are regular Americans. That's how it works. That's really
Jeez.
what's going on. So, like people think we don't even have the right to tax protest. If we wanted to tax protest, government could do everything it wants. We would just be dealing with hyperinflation. So that's what the IRS is really after. Now, state agencies are different. They actually need the money. And so they'll do things differently because they actually need the money, where the
Mm.
IRS doesn't need the money. It just needs to destroy it.
Tell the story, Anthony, of the suicide note.
Yeah. That was that radicalized me. And I think that was years ago. We did, I think this is one of the things, the most common name we had for our clients, Steve.
Hmm.
So Steve became like the stand-in for any, in our internal dialogue here. Oh, we have Steve on the line. That's always Steve, right? So Steve was a client of mine, and he lived up in somewhere up in Marlborough, Connecticut, somewhere up there. And he had a revenue officer then who was assigned in Weathersfield, from the Weathersfield office. He didn't have the biggest case in the world, I'm sure it was to him. He had some payroll, he had some issues. He owed about 90,000. And I was working on his case. I'm like, Steve, I think we got a solution for you. You can live with. We got to do this. We got to do this. Got to do this. And Steve would get back to me now and then. He wasn't really great at communicating. And then one morning, back in the day when we actually had fax machines, I went back to the back room, looked at the fax machine. I'm like, "What's this here?" And I'm reading this note, and uh, it's a note that says, "Call Anthony at IRS Medic, and he will tell you what this is all about." Um, like, okay, what's this all about? And so I call wife. She's like, "Yeah, Steve just killed himself.
Mm.
That's a suicide note." I'm like, Oh my God. No, no. And like, this is stupid. I had his problem solved. I had his problem solved. He just had to finish it. It's like, it was going to be okay. And I'm like, why didn't he? You hired us. We're going to save you, dude. What are you
Wow.
doing? And that was something that said, okay, what do my clients really know? Do they really know we can fix this? And then the revenue officer before I got aboard, she wasn't really that nice to him. And I kind of, I got her to back off, but I think it's the entire, and really, the IRS is designed to destroy men. If you really think about it.
Really?
Yeah,
Jeez,
no, it's designed to destroy men. And
Anthony.
what they do, that's why, you have a lot of female, most auditors are female
Yeah.
because the IRS is designed to destroy men. It will as women as well if they make the wrong moves, but it's, my clients are mostly men. And it's sort of like a battle. Hey, look, I'm a guy trying to make some money here, and you have this thing that isn't right. You know, the IRS isn't right, and you're risking everything, and you're working your butt off around the clock, and the government isn't doing anything, but yet they're your number one, your number one shareholder. Every year they get the most. Every year they get the most, and they don't do anything, you agree with. And
Hmm.
so that entire, the type of personality that someone's going to make someone an entrepreneur is an A-level personality. Well, that person challenges things.
Hmm.
So that is the person is trying to get is people who are a challenge and a threat to the US government. It
Wow.
wants to destroy alphas. That's
Jeez.
what the goal of the IRS is. Always. Oh, its goal is to put us down. I just put up a video today on my channel. Is the IRS a humiliation ritual?
Hmm.
And there's no question it is. It's a humiliation ritual. Why? And this is my quickest, clearest understanding of it. In law, you have these concepts that if someone signs something they didn't understand or you're forced them to sign it, that's called a legal contract. You did it under coercion. And actually, my first the plea agreement that I got withdrawn, you basically apply contract law analogs to say, hey, look, this guy didn't know that what was going to happen if he pled. He didn't do it with full knowledge. So that's the appellate court said, oh, yep, we're going to have to bring back that. We're going to have to withdraw that plea of guilty. It's not valid. Well, now what happens with a tax return? When you get a tax return, what are your requirements? Well, it's too complicated, so you send it off to a tax pro. Now, hopefully they're doing your things. Hopefully you like what they do. They send it back. You sign it. They signed it. Now you sign it. Now what happens? You are 100% responsible for everything you sign. The IRS
Hmm.
comes back to penalize you, whatever. You may use your tax preparer as an excuse, but they don't have to remove that penalty whatsoever. And we've had cases where we've had clients do something wrong the IRS came back for, and they got 3 different opinions. And
Wow.
one case where they talked to a securities lawyer in Boston, one tax lawyer in Switzerland, and then another tax lawyer in Switzerland. All 3 said, "Oh no, you're fine." Turns out they weren't fine. We looked to get those penalties waived. The IRS says, "No, no, no, no. You should have known. You should have known that the 3 people you saw actually didn't know enough. You needed to know enough about the law to get the right legal advice." So just utterly crazy. So that's that's what happens. So that's what I say. You really want to do your own research because you're really the one responsible. And I see it time and time again. And and Joe around here, one of the common things I see is a lot of the people that you and I grew up with, a lot of those families. You're like, oh yeah, they're the rich family. They're a rich family.
Hmm.
Then you're talking to them right here. You're like, what happened? Like,
Wow.
yep. And then they're telling you everything that happened. You're like, oh my god. And it's just a common theme that the tax code is designed to destroy men. And by destroying men, it destroys the family. And that's the goal. And that's really the goal of the IRS.
Ugh.
It's part of the whole, when you really get into it, when you want to take away and really look at it, like who's impacted, what happens, and the fear and loathing the IRS creates is the reason why people want to escape it and they put themselves at risk. But really, the way that I've always told people, like the way to beat the IRS, and this is my takeaway in the book, is to out IRS the IRS.
Hmm.
It's like, no, 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 no. You're trapped in here with me. Let's talk about it. Let's go through the compliance. Let's do it. And then like, oh, we got time. We got to move on to other cases. That's the thing you have. If you have a, they don't have the time, and that's the leverage that you have right
Hmm.
now. They don't have the time, and the IRS doesn't have the staff. They're not nearly what they used to be, and this is the biggest problem that Americans face that allowed the IRS to grow is John F. Kennedy.
Hmm.
John F. Kennedy, I think he's a great guy. I think he's a great guy, but something he said wound up with a disaster, and I don't think he meant it. I don't think he meant to
Wow.
do it. But here's what happened. John F. Kennedy gave his speech. That's not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Unfortunately, a lot of people listened to that. A
Hmm.
lot of highly skilled people listened to that. My dad went to Brown University. He said, "Oh, yeah, not just me, but a whole bunch of my classmates went into public service working for the government." So, what happened is we had a
Huh.
lot of JFK inspired people go to the IRS, and these are the people who made it work. They made it work, and they made the entire complexity work. What I saw, and this is the warning sign I saw back in 2009 when the first of these guys started retiring. The IRS is losing great human beings who
Hmm.
could just like, you know what, we got to find a solution to this. We don't want this case to come back. Let's find a solution. Okay, close enough. Let's move on. Wisdom, and they were predictable, great guys to work with. Well, they retired, and some of their trainees, and I just talked to one of their trainees. She was in New Haven, still great, just like them. She just called me yesterday, "Anthony, I'm retiring." I'm like, "Oh God, no, you're one of the last," because it takes an exceptional human being to work at the IRS who at the higher level.
Hmm.
And exceptional human beings have a lot of other options, and there's no cultural incentive. Back in the 60s, could be like, okay, maybe a colorable claim that the tax code was doing something good. But I don't know how many people are actually believing that anymore. So that's really the problem that we have is we have an IRS structure built up with people who are no longer there and are never, ever coming back.
Wow.
There is no way. So the IRS is a rotting corpse, if you will. And people are filling in there, but they can't do what they used to do. They have incredibly limited things. They have to do what they have a module for. Okay, we can audit on this because we have a training module on this. Okay, there might be other issues, and this is where I think the tax industry gets a little bit hypothetical. Well, this could happen, this could happen. It's like, okay, but who's going to audit that issue?
Hmm.
Who's there? Who's there at the IRS who would even know that? And is there, they let you know which auditing programs they have. And when you see one, like, okay, we want to avoid that because this is how they're going to do it.
Hmm.
But a whole bunch of things, they just abdicated. They can't get to it. They don't have people for that. So there's huge swaths of the IRS that aren't enforced. Huge.
So in the case of Steve, where he passes, does the debt burden get passed to somebody else? What happens there?
In his case, it did not, fortunately, but it can. And it can because he did not file a joint with his wife.
Ah.
That is an awful thing. And then, then the worst place is having a tax problem in a community property state. That is where it happens. In Connecticut, we're not community property, and this is how it works. Like Texas, oh, I hate dealing with Texas tax problems because it could be like this. Let's say that you own a dry cleaning business, okay, and you didn't make your payroll tax deposits, and you and your wife, you don't file jointly. You say, you know what, hon, I have a lot of risk in my business. Cash flow might dry up. I don't want you with the business. Let's file separately. Wife said, you know what, great idea. I'm just a school teacher. I don't want to deal with it. I'll file it separately. So now this is what happened. Now, or just say you're audited. Just say you're audited. Schedule C audit. You're wound up with a huge assessment because you had the wrong. And the audits go wrong all the time. By the way, we often fix audits, but audits go wrong all the time.
Hmm.
So what will happen in that case is the IRS will look to collect against the spouse who isn't liable.
Wow.
And it's really not something where the innocent spouse rules apply because it's an application of state law. State law says a community property state is everything your spouse makes, you own half.
Wow.
Everything your spouse owns, you have half. And so it's one of the worst things to do. So spouses in
Mm.
community property states You gotta really, really watch it. And that's where, if you are running a business in one of those states, you really, really got to think of a proactive strategy, because that's also the way the IRS will work. So assume that you file a joint return with your wife, and assume that the IRS, wants to get a tax evasion charge against you. They're going to charge your wife too. Why? Does she have anything to do with it? Nope. But it's going to make you plead, isn't it? That's going to make you plead. The IRS has a conviction rate of 91%, not because they win a trial that much, but because they force people to plead guilty, because they
Hmm.
take away their options. And really, I don't do the trial work myself. I have friends who do. Michael Minz in Houston, he's one of the best. He's been doing it for years. I talk to him a lot. We work on cases a lot. He says, look, a robust tax evasion defense is going to be at least $500,000
Wow.
if you want to win, and closer to $1 million. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. So who has $1 million to spend on a tax evasion defense, and who has the time, stomach, and family who will support that?
Mm.
So essentially, at some point, there's nothing you can do. Are you going to mortgage your house to pay for half an attorney fee that might get you not guilty, or are you just going to go in and do the time because it's the right thing to do, and it won't put your family in a worse position than you guilty person did? That's what it's all designed to do, to make you, oh, I did the wrong thing. I tried to make money and build my future. I should have given more to my silent partner who demands so much from me. I've learned my lesson, and I will be supplicant. So that's really that's a huge part of what this is about.
I appreciate you writing, in the bio and everything, but I read a term, Anthony, that I haven't heard that you wrote in decades. So what does the term pony legs mean to you?
So Phil Kovacs, a great friend of mine. Yeah, I was in bands with him in high school. The nickname he gave you, I don't remember if it was Pony Legs.
Yes.
He gave you Pony Legs. Well, then you were the assistant coach. Then you were, like class around 1990. I don't think you were. I don't know if you were at Lyman Hall anymore. I think you moved on. I don't know if you were coaching there anymore, or I wasn't on the team. So I became the default Pony Legs, because you weren't around. So then Phil called me Pony Legs. So yeah, that was a nickname for our a large Italian legs that
Yes.
power us through the day.
Yeah, I haven't heard that term in a long time. We haven't spoken in 30 years. I don't.
Well, we saw each other at CrossFit.
Oh, that's right.
Right. I was still drinking, so I wasn't doing so great. But I think in
Oh,
2011, I'm like, I struggled with CrossFit. You and I were struggling with CrossFit
uh,
to go like, oh God, this is terrible.
lose a lot of weight,
We were
yeah.
having a hard day.
I remember coaching you. I remember not having a lot of the gifts many of the players would get, but your determination and your drive was unparalleled. I mean, you worked really hard, Anthony. That's what I remember most about you.
Thank you. That's right. I did not have the talent. I did not have all those kids with all the guys with the talent drove me nuts.
Yeah,
And you said some you really helped me figure out some things though.
I did.
Yeah, and here's something, and I always kind of wonder, and I want to ask you this question, but let me set it up a little bit. So one day, we're doing practice, and I kind of knew what you were doing. Um, you said, "Oh, hey, we're going to do penalty kick practice." Okay, so you brought everybody up, and you talked to the goalie separately, but you talked to everyone who's going to do it. It's like, okay, guys, let me tell you about penalty kicks. It's a give me. They want to give you the goal, but they just can't give you the goal. So all you need to do is rail it in there, and it's going to work. And I said, okay. So I did, and that's what I've done every time since, and I
Ah,
haven't, and I have never missed one. And this is what I realized, and this is why I realize it works, because you don't want to aim, because when you're aiming, you're going to tell the goalie where you're going.
mm.
You yourself want to be surprised where the ball goes. Just nail it so hard, it's like, do that. So now, and so it worked. And you gave me that psychological edge thinking I had the advantage, and that it's always worked for me. So now the question I have, because you were a goalie, what
Yeah.
did you tell the goalies?
Well, there's three, as far as I see it, there's three different personalities that take goal kicks. So the one is generally the forward who has one place every time. They can hit that side netting and they just nail it every time. The second would be the defender who generally just blasts it, just hits it as hard as they can because that's just what they do. And then you have the midfielders who kind of pick a side and they're the most dangerous. But as far as a keeper is, you see where their planted foot is. Wherever they plant their first foot is gives you a read generally on where it's going, but it's fractions of a second
Yeah.
that does it. And good recruiting can tell you some of the things as well. They have all the, this kicker hit it in this side 90% of the time, etc. So, it all varies, but soccer is a wonderful game in that way because it constantly changes.
Yeah, yeah, it's a wonderful game. Well, and I did get it. I did get into it a little bit more recent in life because I really wasn't good in high school. I tried hard. I didn't
Okay.
understand the game. I didn't understand the game that much. Even though got great coaching, spreading the ball around, I just was missing. Like I didn't really know where I fit in.
Mm,
But what happened was later on in life, I got involved in hockey, and I didn't play in high
good.
school. But I was like, oh sure, I could probably play good enough. I played pond hockey, so I'm like, oh sure, I tried it, and I was lucky enough to get in with a whole bunch of really good dudes, and we actually had like adult practice. So we would
So
actually have hockey practice as adults. And I, worked my butt off because I always felt like I had to make up for my
yeah,
lack of
you did.
talent.
Yeah.
And so the thing that happened, and then I had a friend of mine, Dave Ray. He races stock cars up in Stafford Springs. So he loved playing hockey too. He explained to me, he's like, "You want to know what hockey is, Anthony?" I go, "I don't know. What's that, Dave?" He goes, "It's about imposing your will."
Hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, that's what it is. And so there's one of those things that gets in your head. It's like every fight on the board. No, I'm going to win it. Why? Because I want to win it. I want
Hmm.
to win it. I'm going to win it. And so I became incredibly aggressive and I quit drinking, lost a bunch of weight. So I became devastating at hockey for a guy who never played. I'm playing with some pretty good guys and just out hustling and working my butt off. So then a few years ago, I was invited to play indoor soccer. I'm like, oh, sure, why not? It can't be that bad. Well, oh my God, I applied the hockey intensity to soccer. I'm like, wait a second, I'm not terrible. Wait, they all think I'm good. Like, wait, oh, I better act like I'm good because they think I'm good. Um, so that's kind of where that went. But and then there was one thing I want to say about you that was probably the most we didn't touch on yet, and I don't think I teased it at all. The thing, because what were you doing at Southern? You were going to school for Southern. Were you
Com-
going for education when you started or
computer
something?
computer science, technology. Computer
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one day you came back because you would drive from soccer. You would drive straight from Southern to soccer practice.
Right.
Okay, and you would show up, and then one day you were just in this idea in your mind, and you said, you could do anything if you put your mind to it.
Hmm.
Okay. And so I know I challenged you, and I know a few other people said, and I said, Joe, what about somebody? We probably it was the '80s, so we probably didn't use the word Down syndrome, but what about someone who's Down syndrome? Joe, could someone with Down syndrome become a doctor? And without hesitation, you said, yes, yes, they can. And I was like, Joe's insane. He really, but your conviction,
I don't
your,
remember.
oh my God, it's great. Your conviction was 100% on this.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, I'm just not going to fight him on it. I'm just not going to fight him on it. But this is what happened because, it's like one of these things you think about, right? Well, how could someone with Down syndrome become, how could it happen? Well, this is an impossible thing, but, maybe if they had this, maybe if they had this, and maybe they had this, maybe there's a way, maybe there's a way. When you said that, though, one thing that happened, I said, Anthony, you don't have Down syndrome. Yeah, no, I don't. So it's like, well, what's holding you back?
Hmm.
I didn't know at the time, but now I know the answer: the lack of discipline.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think what happened was
Hmm.
that is how I approach every impossible situation. That I think part of me does believe because of you
Hmm.
that someone with Down syndrome, if they try hard enough, could become a doctor and a good one. And it's
I
because of you, and that belief has influenced
hmm.
what I
Maybe I
believe.
was
Yeah.
amazing. Maybe I
Yeah.
maybe I didn't realize it, but I was actually teaching tension and release.
Yeah.
Quite
You
possibly.
did.
Subtly.
Right. The tension
Un
how did I release it?
yeah,
The way I
uninten
released it is I resolved to do my best because maybe you were right.
mm, hmm.
Yeah.
Has there been anything in the recent history, Anthony, like last month or so that you changed your mind on?
Um, I would say this, maybe not last 3 months, but generally an overall trend in the last recent amount of time is, I used to be one who believed that political parties mattered.
Mm.
I'm sorry, guys. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're, and really where I'm just convinced is, what we're looking at on the political stage is professional wrestling. It's professional wrestling every which way.
100%. Yes.
And I remember marking out over when Hulk Hogan dropped his leg on the Iron Sheik and America was strong again. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
that. I'm sitting there next to my little brother. Oh my God, it actually happened. When you look at how how are heroes created? Generally, heroes are created through the introduction of a bad guy. Okay, and
Mm,
that's what that's the dynamic of professional wrestling. You have your face who represents the good guy, but on his own, the face is boring. The
mm.
face is boring, and who cares? Who cares? But if the face is defending truth and honor and generally good things, or an underdog status against the bad guy then do something even more terrible.
Mm.
Well, you want someone to impact justice on the bad guy, and the good guy's the closest guy with the most ability, so you're cheering for him. Now you're the fan of the good guy. But guess what? When they go to the bars afterwards, they're drinking together.
Hmm.
What's with that?
They
Because
sure
they're
are.
on the same team.
Yeah.
That's why. And when I was sort of thinking this thought that US politics is really like professional wrestling. And then Hulk Hogan came out on the Republican National Convention and hulked out. I'm
Huh.
like, I think they're trying to tell us something. So I think that's really where I figure it's like, you can't think that anyone in Washington, D.C. is really on your side because when you actually dig a little deeper, every hero that we have as a hero probably isn't. Probably isn't. And really, the thing that shocks people the most when I tell them this is really from a tax perspective. From a tax perspective, maybe debate the other things. From a tax perspective, the two top worst presidents of all time, and it's not even close. Abraham Lincoln and George Washington.
Really?
Not even close. Yeah, when you actually, but again, the government pays to program us to believe us that these were the good guys. No, they're the worst, and they were. George Washington was a terrible traitor. He was a terrible traitor. He actually was part of the group that formed the coup d'état in the Articles of Confederation. There was nothing wrong with the Articles of Confederation except it didn't allow the graft that a large centralized federal government would. So George Washington and his Freemason co-conspirators created the crisis of a weak central government that the Constitution would just happen to solve. Hey, we got the thing.
Mm.
So they created the tension and the release.
Huh.
They did both sides, right? So, what was George Washington's first law that he signed with his new powers of this federal government that's just going to be everything? Well, what it was an intentionally ruinous tax. It was an intentionally ruinous tax that affected the rural parts of the country the worst. It was the tax on whiskey. The whiskey tax was so bad in its cost and who it impacted. And the thing that's lost on a lot of historical scholars is how quickly the Fourth Amendment was violated,
Wow.
that revenue officers went into people's houses, knocked down doors. It was such an unpopular tax against the people, against some of the very people who made George Washington's victory possible. He betrayed patriots who were fighting for independence. He betrayed them by invading Pennsylvania with 10,000 federal troops to
Wow.
enforce his ruinous tax. And that set the stage for it. And that set the stage for a federal
Jeez.
government that will do anything to get its tax. And Abraham Lincoln was actually just a worse example of George Washington. That he was just a far more depraved. I mean, far more. Abraham Lincoln's by far the worst president we ever had. You
Hmm.
can't like in what he did in the areas of law. Abraham Lincoln's also the first person to impose an income tax, the first
Whoa.
one in the country. It's the income tax is a Republican idea. So for all you Republicans out there who say you think the Republicans are on your side, yeah. So those are sort of the biggest things that probably I've changed on,
Hmm.
is that the government is really against us, and the U.S. Constitution isn't a good thing. It's a sales pitch for government tyranny. That's what it's
Jeez.
actually for. And of course, we got a central bank all of a sudden, with George Washington and Alexander Hamilton. Jackson got rid of it. But the groundwork was laid, and now we have central banks again, where we don't have any control. Again, and there's another example of the government and the central banks creating the tension for the problem they solve. They created every financial panic. And they say, oh, the problem with having a central bank is you got all these panics going on. With a central bank, we'll avoid these panics. And so
Jeez.
the same thing. And so, Congress gave all this power, to private bankers. And we'd have no control over that whatsoever. And that's often lost. And that's where, Republicans and Democrats aren't going to talk about that. They're not going to talk about the Federal Reserve because they all get paid by the Federal Reserve.
Hmm.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm politically homeless, Anthony.
Good. Yeah, yeah. That's the best place.
I agree. Yeah,
I'm with you. I'm like, yeah, no, no. Anything in Washington D.C. isn't going to be good
yeah, it's not
because we're a nation founded on a huge lie,
right.
and waking up to that.
Hmm.
Waking up, like, wait, I studied constitutional law. I believed in it. And it's funny when I kind of look back now. I took some really good classes at Quinnipiac, some advanced constitutional classes. As I look back on it, I remember reading these things and, like, okay, they're having debate whether or not we should have a federal government or not. And Henry Lee of Virginia is getting all angry. He's all against the federal government. And in my mind, I remember being suspicious of people who didn't want this large federal government. I wanted the federal government to win. Well, of
Hmm.
course it won, but it's something. I found it interesting in myself. I'm like, that was weird. I had a bias, back then, um, that was really prevalent. And it's like, well, where did that bias come from? And I think I've come up with some good ideas where we all have been conditioned to accept authority. That's one of the number one things Americans are taught constantly. Accept authority, don't challenge it. Don't challenge it. Don't go along, comply, 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 don't challenge authority. And I think that's where it came from. And hey, the federal government won, so they're the good guys, right? Uh, that's kind of what we have. Yeah.
Hmm. So I think you know my story, Anthony. I started my tech business there in '93, right there in Wallingford,
Did you start it at 401 Center Street, by the way?
I didn't start it there. I ended up having an office there about 95, 96, something like that. Yeah, yeah. So, I was working way too hard and putting my health in the back seat, and 14-hour days, 16, you're no stranger to this. And I'm in front of the doctor, and she tells me I'm 340 pounds. And she says, if you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. My daughter was just born. So it scared the life out of me. Driving home, spent the next 6, 7 months, lost about 130 pounds, kept it off. You can't look at it as a finishing line weight loss. You've got to make lifelong changes. So when I tell people the story, for what's secret? What's your secret? What you do? And I said, just discipline. That's how I did it. I got motivation, focus, determination. How does discipline play a role in your life, Anthony? Parent.
Well, Joe, I got to say the title of your podcast really gave me thought because Tom Izzo sent it to me, and I really thought about that. I really thought about, huh? And the way that I approach this is because I would not self-identify as someone with discipline
Interesting.
because that's a scary word to me. But if you say this, do you like daily routines
Hmm.
of delayed gratification? Do you like slowly working on products where your improvement is barely perceptible on a daily basis, but over the long term, you see some big results? Do you like slow progress every
Hmm.
day? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of I love routines and I love making slow progress every day on things. I love chipping away. Tom would have me do a basic 10-minute metronome exercise every day. He goes, dude, if you just do this, you'll be awesome. Okay, I'm going to believe you, Tom. But just like
Hmm.
doing that. And so what I would say is that I think the word discipline to me is scary, but it's actually how I've gotten everything.
Hmm.
In 2015, I wasn't at 350. I was at 250. So I had to go, but I had to, I'm like, what's going on here? I would still try to ride my bike and would squeeze, 20 pounds of what into a 10-pound sack,
Right.
and be miserable. So 2015, I quit and I just jumped like, I'm going to start new habits. I'm just going to start totally new habits. And it was scary. And now I could see why I was trapped so much when I was in it. I could see why, it's essentially the misery of being trapped makes you want the trap.
Hmm.
It really keeps you, and it keeps you in there. And like, I'll tell you, like, this is just a personal thing. I'll tell you a personal thing. Like the thing that scared me the most when I was sort of like, okay, I was drinking a little much for about a year. Like, okay, this is really going a long way. I know where this is going. I don't like it. Um, but I'd be drinking at night and be like, like 10 o'clock. I'm like, okay, I got to stop drinking because I got to do work. Like, okay, trying to stop drinking. But I'm like, oh, you know what? I want to hear that song haven't heard in a while. I haven't heard this song in a long time. Let me look it up on YouTube and listen to the song. I start typing it in. I'm like, wait a second. The purple text came up. I searched it before. I searched to listen to the song before, and I have no recollection of it.
Oh.
And thinking to myself, oh my God, I don't remember listening. No, I haven't heard a song in 10 years. But I'm like, dude, who else was on this computer? It was you. Who else
Mm.
would look for this? No one else knows this song, but you do. And I'm like, this is
Mm.
scary. I said, that frightened me because I said, if I can't remember what I'm doing, I can't remember what I'm saying, and that I must be repeating myself constantly. I must be a broken record.
Wow.
And that is what really said, "Oh boy, I got to figure out a way to get off of this." And I also smoke cigarettes. So there was Alan Carr. He wrote a book, "The Easy Way to Quit Smoking." That's actually how I ended up drinking because I didn't want
Mm.
people to know I smoked, so I would limit my drinking. Well, I read this book, "The Easy Way to Quit Smoking" by Alan Carr in 2011. He was right. I quit smoking like that. I'm like, oh, let me try it out. I got to go drink it. Well, I want to smoke. Went, got drunk as I could. I'm like, I don't want to smoke. Can't believe it. So then I
Mm.
started drinking more.
You substituted one with
Right.
another.
Yeah. So I just started drinking more because I'm like, oh, I won't smoke. And that was the socially unacceptable thing I didn't want people to see me do. So that's kind of how it happened. But, really, so he wrote a book, The Easy Way to Control Your Drinking, which
Mm.
basically he's like, look, you're actually trapped by it. You actually don't even like it. Let me explain how you actually don't like it. Now, it doesn't work for everybody, but, it was wired for me. So I read the book. I'm like, oh my, that's it. I'm done. And I jumped into a new life, got back into working out. Now I'm able to practice my guitar a little effectively.
Mm.
Drinking and playing guitar when you're a hack isn't really a good,
Mm.
a good act. But that's when I started just getting focused and just like, okay, look, I'm, quitting drinking. I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start working out. I'm gonna start riding my bike more. I'm gonna start doing music. I'm gonna start doing these things that are important. And
Hmm.
it's just been, it's, and then I think the thing that keeps you going is who you run into while you're doing this, right?
Mm.
That's what keeps you going because you meet people with kind of similar stories and similar challenges, and inspiring you, and so it keeps you going. When you're like, oh, thank God I got out of that lack of discipline, and that's what, and now that's how I look at things too. It's like, oh, why
Mm.
is that person stuck there? They lack the discipline to do what they need to do,
Hmm.
and they're stuck. And so don't yell at them. Don't, nope, nope. They're suffering from what you suffered from. And the discipline seems like it's too hard. Discipline sounds like it's a bad word, right? I'm
Yeah.
going to get disciplined. No, that's a great word.
Mm. What motivates you, Anthony?
um, I'm trying to think. Oh boy, I think those moments of magic
Hmm.
that, right now, what motivates me is that, before, and I think this is the temptation you have in business. I was a hippie. I was a pretty, well, even guy with the right value system. Then I started a business. And the problem is that the success will tempt you.
Mm.
Success will tempt you into becoming something you're not.
Mm.
And now you're all concerned about things that you never were concerned about before. And you're trying to put on it, and you're working hard to try to put on an image, and your expenditures are part of your image.
Hmm.
and you're looking for meaning. And where I was at, I was like, I was just like, I was living for the future. All right, let me build my business so I can sell it off to some freaking hedge fund, and then I'll
Hmm.
just relax on the beach, right, in my with my E minor chord all day long. Um,
Nice.
that's really where I was, and I was taken out of life. But this is what would happen. I'd be so sentimental, looking and yearning for these times that I couldn't quite get, and like frustrated, like, man, why are Saturdays kind of depressing? Like Saturday at 4 o'clock would be depressing for me. Why? What's going on? I wouldn't understand that. I felt disconnected with God, with life. So I think one of the big things for me is I did get really into the joining the choir got me even more
Mm.
into Jesus. I'm Catholic. I'm really pretty much all the way there. And now what I could say is this is that I have experienced the glory of God.
Hmm.
And there's nothing as good. There is nothing as good as that. And I've noticed, like, okay, what are the things that will lead you to experience the glory of God? And it's putting yourself out there.
Hmm.
It's trying. It's exposing yourself. It's doing something for somebody else. Taking a risk, taking a social risk. You know what? Somebody might think this is funny. Somebody might make fun of me. I might say the wrong thing, and I might give fodder for some snarky social media comments, but doing it anyway. And just giving of yourself and getting other people motivated to do it. And then you're there, you're like, wait a second, what's going on? Like all those things I was yearning for that I couldn't get, that mocked me. I'm experiencing it.
Hmm.
And it didn't cost me anything. And it's like, no, it didn't require me selling my business to a hedge fund.
Hmm.
um, so that's, I think, what really keeps me going is those incredible moments of when we have so much ugliness in the world, and you can get really focused
Bitter.
on that.
Yeah.
But when you're able to separate to say, your true happiness is in your work. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people think, and me being one of them, that the ideal life is one of leisure. That people are walking around, people are so worked to death right now that they think a life of leisure is the solution.
Mm.
And it's not at all.
No,
It's
it's not.
not at all. The solution is accessing your God-given rights to create.
Hmm.
That is the solution. That's where you will find it. Our work, our true work, is art. Art is a reflection of the initial creation. We are imitating God when we create. And that is where we will get the feelings you can never, there's not one check you could write to give you that feeling. There's only one way to do it. My, you know, if I didn't have to do, I would load my day up with a whole bunch of other challenges if I wasn't
Mm.
doing. I do like my work doing here. I could deal with less IRS, to tell you the truth,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
um, I love my clients so much. But if my idea of heaven would basically be like, okay, wake up in the morning, do my prayers, work out, okay, a couple hours of band practice, okay, all right, I'm going to go do 4 hours of trail work. All right, then I'm going to cook dinner for a whole bunch of people. And then I'm going to be so tired to go to bed at like 9:30.
Hmm.
All right, perfect. That's perfect day for me. Um, where
Sounds
and
good.
I think that's one thing is you need to find, and I think with the tax system and fraudulent monetary system we have, one thing I say is people say I have to have financial security. Well, look, if you're basing your financial security around the U.S. dollar, you don't have it. You
Hmm.
don't set the value of the US dollar. Other people do, and they can put it to anything.
Hmm.
So be careful what you're saying your security is. Create your real security. And how do you do that? By
Hmm.
having a great network of friends and family and
Hmm.
doing things for them. That's where you will find your real money. I don't need much money to have a big smile on my face, which helps. Which helps because I don't have the pressure to have to do like that's not going to get me anything. I already know that. That's just going to get me more problems, and I'm going to be, and then when you're and it's like when you're the attorney, you learn, like, people think you have a lot more money, they're going to victimize you, and I belong to networking groups, or I belong to networking groups for digital marketers, and I always love what they say about attorneys. Oh, I got a great attorney. He doesn't know, like, he's paying me a lot of money to do this work. Um, So it's something that you figure out, like, oh, okay, so people are looking at you a certain way. You got
Mm.
to figure that out. Yeah.
Want to show your love for discipline, inspiration, and the Joey Pinz podcast? Now's your chance. Introducing the brand new Joey Pinz merch store, where style meets discipline. Choose from premium apparel, cozy hoodies, stylish hats, durable bags, and your new favorite coffee mug, all featuring the iconic Joey Pinz logo. Perfect for podcast fans, discipline enthusiasts, or as unique gifts for friends and family. Every purchase supports the Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations podcast, helping us continue to inspire greatness and promote positive change. Visit joeypins.com/store today and wear your discipline proudly. Joey Pinz merch. Wear it, share it, and live it. So given the motivation of kind of being creative, moments of magic, your spirituality, how do you measure success, Anthony?
Hmm. I think I measure success by the absence of what I don't like.
Hmm.
I think that's probably how I do it.
Interesting.
I was working in Manhattan a little bit last year, and more money, more money. The problem for me is I can't stand Manhattan.
Hmm.
I there's nothing, and I didn't like it 20 years ago. What it is now? What the? Are
You
you
don't like
kidding
it?
me? Are
Uh,
you kidding me? I mean, it's nothing but an open sewer and constant marijuana, and you're running a gauntlet of like, and you're thinking to myself, like, what client would want to come to Manhattan to visit us? I think
mm.
downtown Wallingford, Connecticut's a little nicer. We have a little bit better parking. So like one example is I'm right on South Main Street, so I have I could hear Amtrak blowing its whistle all the time, and so I'll hear the Amtrak whistle at 5:41 in the morning, and I'll put a smile on my face. I'm not on that train. I
Uh,
am not on that train. So those are some of the things that I would say is like when I'm not forced to do something that I really don't like. That's sort of how I know. And then when I'm
um,
able to be, if I'm able to get out into the woods every day, I kind of need to do something every day. I love getting out in the woods,
mm,
love working out. And if I don't have that, then I'm fairly miserable. And it's pretty obvious that my ex-wife knows when I had a good ride and when I don't. She goes, "You need to
mm.
go ride. Get out of here. Go, go. I don't want to talk to you.
The
Go,
outlet,
go for a ride."
yeah.
Yeah.
Anthony, I'm so glad we talked today, man. I'm looking forward to this. I know you reached out. You reached out before, and thank you so much for your time. Anybody listening or watching, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. You go irsmedic.com. That's my website. I'm also on Twitter at IRS_medic, or I'll throw out my email. I really don't care. They can just email me at aparent@irsmedic.com. Just send me a message there if you want to reach out.
IRS Medic, MEDIC. You've got a great YouTube channel as well. You have the podcast. You got millions of listens on this one particular one. It was cool as heck. And you do a really great job there. Anthony, I'll be up there soon. I hope we can get together and have a cup of tea. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.